Welcome back with a smiley face. A link of previous episodes is provided into the description of the video. You can also join us on Patreon to listen more unlimited audiobooks like this. You can also visit and shop our ebooks. Luna's Journey. Episode 8. Lilis POV. My heart galloped in my chest as I ran down the stairs. It couldn't be true. She couldn't be here. I'd been thinking of all sorts of different ways to rescue my mother, coming up empty. If Gideon couldn't find her after all this time, how could I? But I was willing to try, until my last breath if necessary. When I reached the entrance hall, I grabbed Ben's arm, searching for the impossible. And, impossibly, she was standing in front of me. I blinked the tears away, afraid they would make her disappear. Her scent hit me strongly, and I lurched to the surface wanting to be with her mother. Our mother. Part of me, a small part, took in her gangly appearance. She looked something awful, dirty, and underweight. The larger part of me was reeling from the fact that she was truly, really here. Gideon choked out his long-lost mate's name, but she barely spared him a glance. Her arms rose feebly, extending towards me. Lily. Unthinkingly, I ran into her, colliding with her roughly. Sobs broke from my chest as I inhaled again and again, clutching her to me. I couldn't let her go. Not again. I opened my mouth to tell her how much I missed her, how happy I was she was here when she said something unexpected. I'm so sorry. I tried to pull away, instinct telling me to back off, but she held to me tightly. And then my world was spinning, upside down, right, left, backwards, horizontally. My stomach heaved, but I didn't know if I vomited or not. If I did, it got lost somewhere in this crazy vortex of wind and blurriness. Finally, I landed on something hard, my arm breaking my fall. Pain radiated from my wrist to my shoulder, making my yelp. Closing my eyes, I took a few minutes to breathe deeply, trying to understand what just happened. Good job, Rosie. I wasn't sure if that would work. A deep voice spoke somewhere beside me. It made my skin crawl. Instantly I became alert, my eyes shooting open. The first thing I noticed was the cobblestone floor under me. No wonder that hurt so much. I probably broke my arm when I hit it. A giant fireplace was built into the wall in front of me, the fire roaring inside. Glancing to my right, I saw a large wooden table, big enough to seat at least 10 people, though only 2 chairs were seated at it, one at each end. Beyond that was a 4-poster bed, with black curtains hanging around it. Various types of artwork hung on the walls, the biggest set over the fireplace. The piece reminded me of the Celeste's meadow. I was hoping it wouldn't. I turned my head to the right, where my mother sat on the floor. She was holding her head, probably trying to get her bearings as well. Standing in front of her was Gideon. No. I shook my head, the rest of the fog clearing from my head. Not Gideon, but a man who looked a lot like him. There were subtle differences. This man was taller, and his eyes were different. The aura around him was also darker, much, much darker. This was Gideon's brother. Bastion. Ignoring the pain in my arm, I forced myself to sit up, staring at my mother. She had helped kidnap me, taken me away from my pack, my friends, my mate. My heart shattered in my chest, leaving me gasping for air. How could she do this? Why? I whispered to her. She reached out to me, but I flinched away. Goddess, did neither one of my parents care about my well-being? Don't blame Rosie. She only helped me because I forced her to. Bastion stepped in front of her, crouching down so we were eye level. You must be Bastion, I said. The corner of his lips twitched. Ah, so you know me. Good. Then we can skip the introductions, thankfully. He raised his hand to my face, and I slapped it away. Don't touch me. I spat. You truly are mother and daughter. He looked between us. She has the same fire in her eyes. He told my mother. Concentrating, I felt a push forward, ready to rip this guy's head off. Bastion looked at me with amusement before snapping his fingers. I screamed as I felt my wolf being thrown into the recesses of my mind. It was like someone punched me from inside my soul, the pain ripped through my entire body like fire. I called to Aya frantically, but she didn't answer. What did you do? I shrieked. I simply restrained the beast inside you. You bastard! Throwing my body towards him, I aimed my good hand for his face. Bastion caught my wrist easily, as if I was no more than a child lashing out in anger. Don't touch her! My mother screamed. Back off, Rosalie. You're no longer needed here, so go. I'm not leaving my daughter with you. Very well. He snapped his fingers again, and she disappeared. Where did you send her? Back to her room. That woman can be so stubborn. He rolled his eyes. Now, hold still and don't attack me. When he grabbed my bad shoulder, I gasped in pain, immediately struggling to get away from him. He only held me tighter. His aura grew stronger, washing over me. It was disgusting, like walking through spider webs. Despite that, my arm started to feel warm, too warm. Just when I thought he was going to burn me, he pulled away. I stretched experimentally, my arm was fine. He'd healed me. Big mistake. Without hesitation, I leaned back on my hands, kicking him under the chin. Bastion flew backwards, landing in a heap. Jumping up, I spotted a big wooden door across the room. I'd just grasped the handle when his arm snaked around my waist, pulling me back. I threw my elbow towards his face, satisfied when it connected with his nose. His grip lessened, enough to allow me to turn. I brought it up into his groin as hard as I could. Bastion fell to the ground, hands on his jewels. I ripped the door open, racing down the stone corridor. What was this place? A castle. Old-fashioned fire torches lined the walls, the windows made of thick stained glass. I ran and ran, but the hall never seemed to stop. And there was no place to turn. Eventually, completely out of breath, I stopped and looked around. Only to find the door I'd run out of 6 feet behind me. How was that possible? So much like your mother. Bastion's voice came from behind me. I spun, attempting to punch him in the face, but he dodged neatly. She used that same move on me when I first brought her here. Stupid of you not to expect it then. I hissed. You might be right about that. Bastion stalked towards me, backing me into the room. He kicked the door shut, the lock clicking into place. Like that mattered, if there was nowhere to go? What do you even want with me? I won't help you, I won't let you use me. I told him. You say that like you have a choice. You don't. Whether you like it or not, I will use your blood to make myself stronger again. His face fixed into a sneer. Of course, now I have to wait. Your blood is useless right now. Instinctively, I placed my hand over my stomach. Terror shot through me as I realized my situation. I was trapped, I had nowhere to run. You have to let me go. I whispered. Bastion laughed. Why? Because you're pregnant. I need proper care. I shouted. Not my babies, not my problem. He shrugged. Why was I surprised? This man was a monster. And they said Dimitri was heartless? Bastion outdid him 100 times over. You're evil. I deadpanned. Bastion smiled wickedly. That's what they say. You'll get used to it. Dimitri will never be able to find you. Your own father has wasted too many years trying. You don't really think a simple werewolf can. He's not a simple werewolf. He's an alpha, and my mate. And when he finds me, you can be assured I won't stop him from ripping you to pieces. I said venomously. Bastion's eyes darkened at my words. He was in front of me in a second. How did he move so fast? Or was he teleporting? His hand went around the back of my neck, bringing my face inches from his. His other hand ran into my hair, pulling it back harshly. I bit my lip against the pain. The day I come face to face with your pathetic mate is the day I will rip his heart out in front of you. But not before I show him that I've brought you to my side, that you belong to me. I will never belong to you. You will. Either willingly or forced, but you will be mine. Something sharp pressed against my belly. I glanced down to see Bastion holding a long blade. You wouldn't want me to cut out those babies, would you? I sucked in a shuddering breath. You would kill 2 innocent babies. You're the one who pointed out that I was evil, Lily. I just don't think you realize how evil I actually am. I shook in his arms. He wasn't giving me a choice, I had to protect my pups. A thought struck me, something to hopefully distract him, even for a minute. Where is Jenine? I asked. My question obviously caught him off guard. Why? She killed her wolf, right? The blade moved from my torso, allowing me to breathe a little easier. Bastion looked at me suspiciously. How do you know that? He demanded. I have my sources. He didn't like my answer, anger took over his features. How did she do it? It's next to impossible to kill our wolves. She didn't. I did. She allowed me to. So you made her a human. Enough questions. He shouted. A tiny hint of fear sparked in his eyes. He blinked it away, but I knew, he didn't like that I knew things I shouldn't. He was scared his plan was going to fail. That's all I needed to endure this, to wait until someone came for me. Lilis POV Bastion had left me, promising to have someone bring me food later. That around 6 hours ago. And as promised, food had arrived, delivered by a young girl with curly blonde hair. She'd kept her head down, placing the tray on the table and leaving quickly. And that's where it still sat now. I wasn't touching anything he had made for me, for all I knew it had poison in it. Even if he didn't want to kill me, Bastion had been very clear how he felt about my children. I wasn't going to risk something that would harm them. Sure, I was starving, but I ignored it as best I could. Instead, I passed the time trying to contact my wolf. I could feel she was there still, just very deep down. Aya, if you can hear me, focus on the pups. Protect them. I can bear anything he does, but I'm counting on you to look after our babies. Nothing. No hint of acknowledgement, not even a whisper. I could only pray she heard me, and would do what I asked. Curling up on the bed, I eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. Dreams of my mate and friends plagued my mind, even in sleep, my heart ached. I missed them so much. I just wanted to go home. I woke up crying, my tears staining the pillow. I wouldn't claim it as mine, nothing here belonged to me, and I didn't plan to stay long enough for that to change. The smell of potatoes had my stomach rumbling loudly, and I sat up to see a very unwelcome sight. Bastion was sitting at one end of the long table which was now covered in different food. He had his hands clasped under his chin, staring at me intently. "Creep. Why didn't you eat lunch?" he asked. I lay back down, turning away from him. "Not hungry?" "Yes, you are." "I'm not eating that food." His chair squeaked as he pushed it back. I listened to his footsteps as he approached the bed, coming to stand in front of me. I simply turned my back to him, just wishing he would make the mistake of touching me. He'd have one less arm. "So, your plan is to starve yourself then?" I didn't answer. "There is nothing in your food." "I'm eating it too." Still, I remained silent. Could he not take a hint? What would be the point of killing you? Honestly, it's not me I'm concerned about, I said. I gain nothing from killing your babies. That got my attention. Reluctantly, I looked over my shoulder at him. You didn't seem to have that mindset when you held a knife to my stomach. I hissed. Bastion crossed his arms. I've been thinking about it. What are the chances your children, even one of them, are as special as you? My face paled, all the blood draining to my toes. He smirked. I'd rather wait and see if I'm right. If so, you're of more use to me than I first hoped. Now, come eat. He walked back to the table casually. I stared after him, wanting nothing more than to drive a knife through his twisted, dark heart. Over my dead body would he ever use my pups that way? I was about to go off on him, maybe shove a hot plate in his face when the door burst open and my second worst nightmare stormed in. Instantly, I was on my feet, backed against the wall in a defensive position. Jenine found me immediately, her eyes narrowing to slits. She didn't look much different than the last time I'd seen her. The only big difference was the way I perceived her, the selfish who'd willingly killed her other half and submitted to the devil. So it's true. You brought her here. She turned to Bastion, who was clammy slicing his meat. Yes. He replied nonchalantly. And you're having dinner with her? She shouted at him. Yes. I've been waiting an hour for you in our room. I never said I was coming back tonight. Jenine looked ready to explode. You're not spending the night with her. Ugh. Her voice was as grating and annoying as ever. Bastion slammed down his utensils, the table quaking under the force. He stood slowly, turning his glare on Jenine. Are you giving me orders? His voice was low, dangerous. It doesn't matter, I said before she could reply. You're not spending the night here, and I'm not having dinner with you. His glare fell on me now. Stay out of this. You think I want to be in the middle of your little lover's quarrel? I didn't invite you here, go back to your own room. I crossed my arms. This is my home. I'll be where I want to be. And you? He looked at Jenine. You need to leave. Now. Are you serious? You're really going to stay here with her? My patience is wearing thin, Jenine. Go. To my surprise, she actually left. I stared at the door, wondering how she could leave when I couldn't. Clearly, the door led somewhere, it just wasn't accessible to me. There must be some way to get around that magic? Some way to break the spell so I could escape. Eat. Bastion sat back down, picking up his fork. I shook my head. He shot to his feet again, pointing at the chair meant to occupy me. Sit down and eat. I smirked. It was of me, but I got a little satisfaction watching him lose control. He was going to learn sooner or later that I wasn't just as stubborn as my mother, I was way worse. I would fight him on everything, even the little things. To make my point clear, I sat on the bed, looking away from him. He appeared in front of me, his hand gripping my chin painfully. I met his eyes, letting the hate I felt for him show vividly. "Did you not hear me when I said my patience was wearing thin?" He snarled. "I did. Did it look like I gave a st?" My face whipped to the side, my cheek stinging from his slap. The metallic taste of blood hit my tongue, and I spit the blood onto the floor. I lifted my head and laughed, Bastion's face transfixed into surprise. "What do you think hitting me would accomplish? Do you know anything about me? I spent most of my life as a human punching bag. Pain is nothing new to me." His face darkened, something that was getting old. His anger did nothing to intimidate me. What I did fear, was the calculating look in his eyes. He turned, snapping his fingers. Rosalie appeared, letting out a gasp as she looked around. Before she could comprehend where she was all of a sudden, Bastion walked to her side and slapped her. "What are you doing?" I rushed to my mother's side, catching her before she fell. "Eat," Bastion said. "You're a sick person," I shouted at him. "Eat, or I'll make her unrecognizable." I was so annoyed, when I looked into my mother's face. Her cheek had the imprint of his hand on it, already turning a nasty shade of blue. I placed my hand over it, wiping away her tears. "I'm waiting, Lily." Bastion tapped his foot beside us. "I'm sorry," I whispered to Rosalie. "It's fine." She squeezed my hand. I stood, slowly making my way to the table. When I looked back, my mother was gone and Bastion was taking his seat once more. I took a small portion of mashed potatoes and vegetables. Hesitantly, I lifted the food to my mouth, not tasting it, just swallowing it whole. "Just know that from now on, if you disobey me, your mother will suffer the consequences." My hand froze halfway to my mouth. Bastion smiled at me, a smile full of promise. Taking a deep breath, I focused my attention on maybe getting some answers. "So, why now?" I threw at him. "Excuse me. Why did you decide to take me now? Why didn't you before?" He studied me for a moment. Finally, he shrugged. "I couldn't before. Not for lack of trying though." "What does that mean?" "It means I attempted to bring you here when you first shifted and I knew what you were. But I couldn't. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. But you did bring me here," I said confusedly. "No, I brought Rosie. She just happened to be holding you. I guess you could call it a loophole, a gray area. So you can't teleport me, but you can teleport other people," I confirmed. "Then why didn't you take me when I was hugging my friends, or in the arms of my mate?" "Because then I would have to kill them, and that wasn't ideal. I have other plans for your friends. And some fun plans for your mate." He mused while I tried to keep my anger under control. "Like what?" "Ah, no. That would spoil the surprise." Bastion winked. "Why are you doing this?" I set my fork down, leaning over the table. "All this, and why?" "Because you were exiled? That was your fault." His eyes flashed up to mine. "You think this is some sort of revenge thing on Gideon?" He answered his own question. "It's not. I always knew that I could become more powerful than him, more powerful than the elders. Your father wasted his time trying to steer me away from dark magic, but it was useless. Honestly, I couldn't care less that he got me exiled, I was leaving anyways. The only reason that you're my target, my dear, is because of what you are. The fact that you are Gideon's daughter is just a bonus. You know, that's really sick. Technically, you're my uncle. Yet you want me to be yours? That's insanely messed up. My face screwed up with disgust. Bastion laughed, loudly. I stared at him like he was insane, which he was, of course. He didn't tell you the full story, did he? He laughed again. Well, allow me to enlighten you. Chapter 73. Bastion's POV. Tell me, do you know how many clans there are? I asked Lily. Her face turned thoughtful before she answered. 4. Correct. However, there used to be 5. I took a drink of my wine, the cool liquid coating my tongue. I was born into that 5th clan, Yellow Creek. Clara never said there was a 5th clan. Probably because she wasn't born yet. It is not talked about amongst our kind. The clan. She looked confused. The destruction of it. Her face paled. I poured myself more of the delicious drink, my thoughts going back to my earliest memories. Yellow Creek's elder wasn't like the others. He thought witches were the superior species that we should rule over the others. He wanted to go to war, to claim the werewolf lands, eradicate that humans, make slaves of the vampires. There are vampires! Lily exclaimed. I raised a brow at her. How do you not know that? I asked curiously. I didn't go to school. She huffed. Well, yes, vampires exist, the few that are left anyways. They've all but wiped themselves out. Anyways, Yurik, Yellow Creek's elder, was overruled by the others. He was furious. Instead of settling things diplomatically, he turned to the dark arts. Despite her hatred for me, Lily was listening intently. One hand was cupping her chin, the other placed on the table. Her eyes were focused as she listened to my sad tale. You clearly see where this is heading. The others gathered to overthrow Yurik, bringing death upon the entire clan, for we were, as they said, tainted. They burned buildings, flooded the fields. Killed gruesomely and without mercy. People who ran were hunted and slaughtered, children were ripped away from mothers, families thrown together into seemingly bottomless pits. None escaped the elder's wrath. No one but me. How? She whispered. Pure dumb luck. I was 4 years old at the time, visiting my aunt in the neighboring clan. When the news reached us, she took me in and lied, saying I was her son. But people started to talk, people who knew her. So she sent me to her friends in the Eastern clan, Gideon's family. It was just convenient that he and I looked so alike, people really thought we were brothers. Nobody suspected a thing. Does Gideon know? Lily asked. Yes. When we were older, his parents told him everything. It was after that that he started to watch me more closely, began not to trust me. You never considered them family? Never. I spat. My family was murdered. The people who took me in were always wary of me, always watching me. Always treating me like the outsider I was. They kept the secret about who I was, where I came from. But they never loved me. I sat back in my chair, eyeing her across the table. And before you go off and try to appeal to my good side, save it. I don't crave love like everybody else, I crave power. Yurik had the right idea, just the wrong execution. And he didn't have a mother wolf by his side. I downed my drink with my words. I'm not by your side, Bastion. And I wasn't going to appeal to your good side. I don't believe you have one. Good, then we're on the same page. So, does that answer your questions? Truthfully, I'm surprised Gideon didn't tell you the truth about me. I could tell she was too. What was the point in hiding it? The only answer I could come up with was that he was ashamed, like he always had been. Still, it made no difference to me. If anything, it had only awarded me some time talking to Lily, and time away from the harpy Jenine. Even when she was attacking me, Lily was still far better company. Was there even a point in keeping Jenine around now? Surely I could go ahead without her? Why does Gideon still refer to you as his brother then? Lily pulled me out of my thoughts. I shrugged. Old habits die hard, I guess. We were forced to call each other brother for a long time. Even I slip up occasionally still. How do I know you're not lying to me? Now, that's just insulting. I may be a monster, I may be evil, but even I won't commit incest. There are things in this world that gross me out too. But if you want, I can order a DNA test. Her face became impossibly paler. Fine. Do that. I stood, grabbing a bowl of rolls. I overturned it, dumping them onto the table. Waving my hand over the bowl, water appeared, filling it halfway. Taking my knife, I pricked the end of my forefinger, drawing blood. Come here. I ordered her. She remained seated and I glared at her. Don't make me bring your mother back, Lily. She scowled before standing and coming to my side. I grabbed her hand, drawing blood from her finger as well. Squeezing her finger, I let 3 drops fall into the bowl. Then I did mine. What are you doing? A DNA test. Placing both my hands on the bowl, I explained to her. If our blood mixes together, we are related in one way or another. If it doesn't, we are not. Her mouth opened to protest, but I interrupted her. You should know that blood magic doesn't lie. After all, it is what tied you to your pack. I said the required words, and waited. Lily leaned over the bowl, watching the water intently. Our blood had swirled together a little already, but it was now separating. It was pulled to opposite ends of the water, the result very clear. Lily drew in a sharp breath as I stepped back and behind her. She turned away from the table, pushing against my chest. Don't! She snapped. I just proved we're not related. I don't care. That doesn't change anything. I don't want you, I'll never want you. I placed my hands on the table, trapping her between them. Leaning in, I caught the fear in her eyes, could feel her shaking. This was so much better, I liked a challenge every once in a while. Remember what I told you? You will be mine, but I would prefer if it was willingly on your part. It makes it so much better. No. Lily pushed me again, and this time I caught her wrists. Spinning her around, I brought her back to my front, holding her hands securely. Still, she fought back and I was growing impatient. I called the shadows, the snake-like creatures darting out from the corners of the room. They crawled up our bodies, replacing my hands on her. Lily shrieked and pulled against the darkness. That's extremely dark magic, sweetheart. You won't be able to break it. I kissed the back of her neck. Don't touch me. You don't want me to force you, Lily. Come to me, it's so much easier. I'll kill you. My hand went over her mouth, my lips at her ear. I'd like to see you try. My other hand ran up her side. She whimpered under my touch, attempting to bite me. I'd given her clothes when she arrived here, but right now I wanted her out of them. But something inside me wanted her to want it too. She wasn't giving me any more options. "Remember, you chose this," I whispered in her ear. I took the vial out of my pocket, uncapping it. I forced her head backwards, quickly removing my hand and emptying the contents down her throat. She sputtered and coughed, trying to spit it out. I covered her mouth again before she could, waiting. Her body froze, becoming entirely still. Even her breathing stopped. For a second, I wondered if I'd given her too much. I never got spells wrong, but she was like a statue. 3 seconds ticked by and Lily finally lowered her head. I uncovered her mouth, turning her body to face me. When our eyes met, hers were no longer filled with hatred. They were calm, a soft smile on her face. I smiled in return. Nothing could stand in my way now. Lily held out her hands, glancing at the shadows still restraining her. I shooed them off, pleasantly surprised when she wrapped them around my neck. "Do you know who I am?" I asked her. "Bastion." "And who is your mate?" Her eyebrows furrowed. "I don't have a mate." I smiled. "That's right. Because you belong to me." "Yes. I belong to you." She pulled me down, my lips meeting hers. Dimitri's POV. I was in the kitchen, going over a map of the surrounding areas with Ben, Luke, Killian, Miguel, and Gideon. My office was uninhabitable, my whole floor was actually. Staff were working to repair the mess I'd caused, making me feel. I'd run for hours with no sign of my mate. Eventually, Ajax had gotten through to me, telling me to go home and work out a plan of action. But when I'd gotten here, Gideon was waiting with more bad news. As if the worst hadn't happened already, I had more added on top. Somehow, word had gotten out about Lilis kidnapping. The entire pack was in panic, rumors spreading that we were to be attacked. The fk'd up part? I couldn't tell them they were wrong, because I didn't know. The thing that annoyed me off more was that I had loose tongue in the pack house, someone who couldn't keep their mouth shut. More than likely, it was one of the staff, and when I found out who it was, they were gone. I'd had enough. "You can look at all the maps you want," Gideon said to me now. "It won't help. I've searched this area. And the ones beyond. I've been to different states even." "Well, what do you expect me to do?" I snarled. "I can't just sit around with my thumb up my ass. Why don't you stop being pessimistic and help? Why can't you just see where she is through your orb thingy?" Luke asked. "You don't think I've tried?" Gideon threw back at him. "Well, what haven't you tried?" Ben threw his hands up in exasperation. "I don't know what you want from me. I've tried everything within my limits over the years, and I never found him, or my mate. You don't think I'm just as desperate as you are? Do you not remember that that bastard now has my mate and my daughter?" Gideon shouted. "All the more reason for you to stop doubting yourself, and help us come up with something to find them." Ben shouted back. "All of you, calm down." We turned to see Clara entering the kitchen with Vera, and Isabel trailing behind. What? This wasn't a meeting for children. Aside from that, looking at her innocent face just brought to life the fact that my children were in danger and I was helpless to find them. That wasn't Isabel's fault, but I didn't want her around me right now. "What is she doing here?" I asked Clara. "Everyone in the house is in a state, and Ben is with you. I had nobody to leave her with. Hazel is on her way here with Clint." She interrupted me. Sure enough, the couple walked in a second later. I sighed. Fine. Whatever. I refocused on the task at hand. Maybe you can give us some new ideas. I shot a dirty look at Gideon, who returned it with an equally nasty one. First, you all need to stop fighting with each other. We won't find Lily or Rosalie if we're spending time being at each other's throats. Clara glared at all of us. Ben picked up Isabel at her request. Her tiny face examined each of us in turn, taking in the tension in the room. Her gaze landed on me. Your mate is missing, she stated. Yes, I ground out. She looked at her mother. So use a locator spell, like you did for Charlie. Clara shook her head. It's not that simple, sweetie. Why not? I asked. That's too easy. Bastion wouldn't leave a giant hole like that. And Gideon already tried. My face fell. It was starting to feel like Lily was lost to me for good. Why are you looking like that? I looked at Killian, who was looking at Gideon. He was shuffling his feet, looking at the ground. Wait, have you tried that already? Hazel asked. No. What? Why? Everyone shouted at him in outrage. I knocked the map off the steel counter, ready to jump over and strangle him. Clara looked like she wanted to set him on fire, and Thera had her fists balled at her sides. Why not? I roared at him. Isabel covered her ears, hiding her face in Ben's shoulder. I attempted to control my anger. Because of what you just said. Gideon told Clara. There's no way he would make it that easy. She threw her hands up. That is literally the first thing you should have tried, you moron. Mama, don't swear. Isabel scowled. Sorry, Isa. She bent down, scooping the map I had off the floor. Examining it, she looked at me. Do you have a world map? Or a globe? There's a globe in the library. Thera answered. I need it. Thera nodded, racing out of the kitchen. I pinned Gideon with a cold stare. Anything else we should know? I spat. Pain ripped through just then, radiating out of my chest. I gasped, clutching the counter for support. It was so strong, I felt like my bones were on fire. Dimitri. Luke grabbed my one arm and Miguel caught the other. Together, they lowered me to the floor where I sat, dazed. What was happening to me? Another wave hit me and I screamed, clutching my chest. It hurt so much, I would gladly rip my heart out to escape this pain. It hurts. I shouted. Suddenly, Clara's face appeared before me. The expression on her face said she knew exactly what was happening to me. Make it stop. I begged her. I will. She placed her hands on either side of my head and closed her eyes. After an excruciating minute, the pain eased, faded, and then stopped altogether. Sweat coated my body, running into my eyes, my whole body shook. What was that? I gasped. Clara looked at me with sympathy. That's what happens when your mate is intimate with someone else. She whispered. Her words clicked into my brain, one by one. But I still didn't process them. Lily wouldn't do that to me. She wouldn't. No, someone had to have forced her. I didn't realize I speaking out loud until Ben spoke. She was willing. You and I both know mates don't feel pain if the other is forced. He spoke to me, but his eyes were on his mate. It's true. It's the choice to stray from your bond that causes the pain for the other person. Rape isn't a choice. I'm sorry. Clara said. I don't believe it. Dimitri is right, Lily wouldn't cheat on him. Especially not with Bastion. Isn't he her uncle? She would never consent to that. Clint spoke for the first time. Well. We all looked at Gideon, who was taking measured steps away from me. He's not her uncle biologically. Luke was tossed backwards, along with his mate as I jumped over Clara. I propelling myself over the counter and tackled him to the ground, my hands around his throat. Talk. Now. The walls shook under my wrath. Ben, give me ISA. I briefly acknowledged him passing her off and Clara leaving the room. But my main focus was on underneath me. He's adopted. He came to live with us when I was little. I didn't think it was relevant. Gideon rasped. Not relevant. The prick is sleeping with my mate. I roared. Maybe. You'd feel the same pain even if they just kissed. I punched him so hard he was out cold. Useless, he was useless. I looked at Ben. Go out with Isabel. I need Clara in here. I ordered. He nodded, walking away. Thera came in as he left, holding the globe I kept in the library. Clara came in after her, both looking at the passed-out man at my feet. My sister raised her eyebrows but didn't comment, she simply set the globe on the counter and went to stand with Killian. Clara motioned for me to join her, holding her hand out to me. I placed my hand in her smaller one, waiting for instructions on how this worked. Since you're Lilis' mate, you're the best thing to find her, you hold a piece of each other's souls. There is nothing stronger than that, so it will make this easier, if it works. If it is possible to block your location from this type of spell. Still, he should have tried it. She shook her head at Gideon. Okay, I want you to close your eyes and focus on Lily. Think of the best memories you have with her, her face, her smile, everything that draws you to her. And, most importantly, focus on your bond. Let your wolf help you if you have to. She closed her eyes and I did the same. I brought up Lilis' face, smiling at me the way she did when she was happy. I heard her laugh, her giggle. The way she looked when she told me about the pregnancy, how much she was over the moon that we were starting a family together. Ajax helped by remembering the way she felt in our arms when she'd called on him to make love to her. The way it felt when him and I chased each other through the forest. Cuddling under the stars and nuzzling each other. I remembered the first time I saw her, a mixed memory. The way she outshone everyone in the room, and how her eyes captivated me. Even if I hadn't wanted her then, I knew inside she was the one who was going to bring me back to myself. Together, Ajax and I let the bond flow, remembering every happy moment, some of the not so nice ones, and how much we loved her. Everything that made us, us. The day at the beach. Lilis Luna ceremony. The first time she told me off. Everything. Dimitri. Clara called me out of my reminiscing. She was looking at the globe, eyes wide. A spot on the sphere was glowing slightly, I leaned closer, dropping her hand. Isle of Skye, she's in Scotland. Clara whispered. Then that's where we're going. I replied. Ben's POV Gregory. You're slower than syrup on paper, man, come on. Move. I shouted. Gregory shoved past me, muttering under his breath. Perhaps it was a good thing I was too distracted to focus on his words. I doubt Dimitri would put up with a brawl right now. Clara's magic seemed to be keeping him pain-free, but for how long? I had to keep reminding myself that Lily would do anything to survive, for her pups and for Dimitri. Even if that meant having to be intimate with someone who wasn't her mate. I just hoped she knew what she was doing. Are you okay? I glanced over my shoulder to see my mate. I can't remember the last time she looked so concerned about me, if ever. My heart stirred at the sight of her beautiful eyes gazing into mine. Fine. Just thinking. I replied. I'm sure Lily is fine. From what I've seen, she's a tough girl. I know. It's just. I blew out a breath, leaving my words to trail. Sparks erupted as Clara placed her hand on my shoulder. I looked down at her. You're trying to understand why she would cause your alpha so much pain, she said. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyways. I'm going with the assumption that she had no choice. We don't know the situation over there, but I know she would never do that on purpose. She would never betray your alpha that way. We looked around at the men and women boarding the plane. The plane that was to take our small army to Scotland. Gregory had disappeared inside, and I spotted his son a few meters away. Clara squeezed my shoulder, making to move past me. Instantly, I had my arm wrapped around her waist, holding her back. Where are you going? I asked. She blinked at me. I'm getting on the plane. No, you're not. Her eyes clouded over in anger. Excuse me. Do you not know what is coming? There's going to be a fight, a bad one. I don't want you anywhere near that. She gripped my arm, causing me to yelp and release her. I rubbed where she'd burnt me. I'll have you know that I am not some poor, defenseless woman, Benjamin. That dash, she pointed to my arm, is just a taste of what I can do. I may not be as powerful as Gideon, but I am far from helpless. You'd do well to remember that. I watched as she stormed off, stomping angrily past the wolves and on board. A tiny smile appeared on my face. My mate was feisty girl, I'd give her that. Something funny. Dimitri appeared beside me, looking worn and worried. I put my smile away and grew as serious as the situation. Just Clara being. Clara. Ah. Well, let's go. Right. I turned to the rest of the men. Everybody, let's move. We take off in 1 hour. Yes, Beta. They shouted back to me. I followed Dimitri across the placement and to the steps. Ducking my head, we entered the plane and looked around. It was a military jet, filled with our top warriors. The rest of our army was still at the pack, with Gideon. I knew we didn't have enough men here, not even close. But we had the best. The rest would be joining us via portal, which Gideon would open when we contacted him from the island. The element of surprise would, hopefully, turn the odds in our favor. I glanced at Clara, turning the jade necklace Gideon had given her in her fingers. He held an identical piece, a way to keep the portal open once he opened it. I leaned down as we passed her. Where's Isabel? At home. She snapped. The next second, her eyes went wide and her hand flew to her mouth. I smirked. I mean, I know what you meant. I pecked her on the cheek, enjoying the blush that followed. Glad you finally consider it your home. Before she could comment, or deny it, I straightened and continued walking. Dimitri was already seated, his leg anxiously tapping up and down. I took the seat next to him, running my hands through my hair. I went over every detail of our plan in my head, looking for weak points, for any flaws. We'd stayed up all night figuring this out. Best case scenario, we get to Lily without much fuss, get her home, and take care of Bastion. Worst case scenario, we would have to fight Lily herself, if he'd done something to her. That was going to be a tough one, given she was a mother wolf. And our Luna. The plane was starting to fill up and slowly, I could see Dimitri starting to calm down. I knew him too well, this is what he did. He was a fighter. Never the one to sit on the sidelines, but be in the middle of the battle. He'd never fought for anything for himself up until this point though, and that worried me. As if he could hear my thoughts, he turned and met my eyes. The reason doesn't change anything, Ben. You've never had a weakness before. I mumbled. Weakness. He laughed quietly. Lily is not my weakness. She is my strength. My hope, my goodness, my heart and soul. She lifts me up, even when I was the one to bring her down. She's done more for me, and this pack, than I ever thought possible. She's worth fighting for, worth dying for. I nodded slowly. I caught Clara's eyes briefly before she looked away. I know what you mean. I replied. Luke and Miguel took the seats across from us. I nodded at them. You ready? Born ready. Luke grinned. Miguel nudged him. Only for you. Luke winked. Guys. Please. Dimitri snapped at them. They both muttered apologies. We sat in silence while everyone boarded. At last, the doors swung shut and we were instructed to buckle up. The air was thick with tension and nerves, but also determination. I looked around at the men, each one worth their weight in a fight, each one having proven themselves at one point or another. I sent up a silent prayer as we took off that we didn't have to bury any of them when this was over. We'd barely gotten a decent amount of height when I heard Dimitri's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen with confusion before pressing send. Who's this? Being this close, I heard everything, and the reply sent a wave of shock through me. Hello Dimitri. Miss me? His hand clenched so tightly over the device, I worried he would smash it. You'd better have a good reason for calling me Jenine. He growled. She laughed, and I cringed at the sound. Oh, I do. Unless you don't want to know where your mate is. Dimitri was breathing heavily, rage and hatred on his face. I felt Clara come up behind me, and I put a finger to my lips in a gesture for her to keep quiet. I already know where she is. Dimitri was saying. Oh, do you? She's in Scotland. The Isle of Skye. Jenine laughed again. At the castle. Yes. Do you happen to know which castle? What are you talking about? There are 7 castles on this island, Dimitri. He glanced at Clara, who had gone pale. At that moment, I honestly worried for my mate's safety. Before he could explode, though, Jenine spoke again. I'll tell you where she is. That got our attention. Why? And why would I believe you? That's up to you. My motives are my own, but if you don't want the information, tell me. He practically shouted. Silence. I could see him starting to lose control, almost on the verge of shifting. I was about to take the phone away from him when she answered. You'll find her at the most southern castle. It looks ruined, but it's a spell, an illusion. You better not be lying to me, Jenine. I swear to the goddess I'm giving you this information because I want something in exchange, Dimitri. Like? I owe you nothing. Relax. It's something you already want. All I want is for you to kill Bastion. Deal? What? You heard me. I think I'll just kill you both. Oh no. I'm already gone alpha. But we'll meet again, don't worry. Is that a threat? A promise. Goodbye, Dimitri. The line went dead. We all looked at each other, confused. Are we supposed to trust her? Luke asked. Do we have a choice? I looked at my alpha. Do you believe her? He tapped the phone against his leg. Like you said, we don't have a choice. I'll go inform our pilot. Miguel stood and walked off. What are you thinking? I asked Clara, who was sitting beside me with her eyebrows scrunched together. That I hope this isn't a trap. She whispered. I knew what she was thinking about, Isabel. Reaching over, I took my mate's hands in mine. We'll make it through this. And then we can go home to our daughter. Her eyes went wide, as did mine. Oh. I didn't mean. She put her hand over my mouth. I know what you meant. She gave me a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek before going back to her seat. I caught Luke's smirking expression and shot him the finger. Shut up, I said. Dimitri's POV. The closer we got to our destination, the angrier I was becoming. Usually, I would take this time to go over the plan, the details. Encourage the men. This time, I was silent, introverted. I could feel that it was putting off the men, but I couldn't find it in myself to give some grand speech. What would I say anyways? We get my mate back or I'll kill all of you in a blind rage. Yeah, sure. This was different than any other fight I'd ever been in. Too much was at stake, there was too much that could be lost. For me, for the pack. That wasn't the cause of my anger though. All I could think about was what that piece of might be doing with my Lily. Because of Clara's magic, I couldn't feel if she was betraying me or not. And if that's what she had to do to survive, I couldn't fault her for it. But that didn't mean I was okay with it either. Just the thought of him touching what was mine, kissing her, feeling her body, it made my blood boil in my veins. Jenine hadn't had the need to make any deals about Bastion's death. In my eyes, he was already a dead man. And if she was telling the truth, he was a dead man sooner than I hoped. We're about half an hour out. You want to say anything to the men? Ben whispered to me. You do it. All right. I felt him stand and watched him stand in front of our group. I felt like an alpha right now, but at the same time, I didn't care much. I'm sure any man in my position would feel much the same. I looked down at my knees as my beta talked. You all know why we're here. To get our Luna back. He paused. I'll be honest with you all, we don't know if our Luna is under the influence of magic. If she is, there is a chance she will fight against us. I don't need to tell you the consequences if she gets hurt. A snarl ripped its way out of me, audible to everyone. If that so happens to be the case, the only course of action to take is to subdue her. To get her safely through the portal and back home. You all know how these things go. There will be blood. There will be death. But let's make it so it belongs to other side. Each and every one of you has proven yourselves the finest warriors of Blood Moon. I want to see you uphold that honor, and bring our Luna home. You with us. Shouts went up around the cabin of agreement. Ben sat down, sighing loudly. Good job. I said. Thanks. It was very moving. You should write poetry. Luke pretended to wipe away a tear. You're always such a DK before a fight. Ben scoffed. It's the energy, man. Can't help it. I ignored their bantering as I felt the plane tip. We must have been closer than Ben thought. The pilot's voice came over the speakers, ordering everyone to strap in for landing. I looked around, noticing only one person who looked more nervous than excited for the coming battle. But I trusted Ben to take care of his mate so she could go home to her daughter. I had my own mate to worry about for now. My stomach lurched as we descended. Admittedly, I had never been a good flyer, but sometimes it was necessary. I looked out the window, seeing the tops of trees appear, and the ocean below us. Far out in the distance, I caught sight of what looked like an abandoned ruin. I kept my eyes trained on that until the trees blocked my view and I felt the wheels hit the pavement. The landing was rough, and everyone sighed in relief when we finally came to a full stop. "I am never getting one of these things again," Miguel muttered. He had a green undertone to his face as he stood on wobbly legs. "Not even for our honeymoon? I was going to take you to Greece," Luke said. "I'll swim." I stood and made my way to the exit. Ben and Luke followed behind me with their mates, and the rest followed after us. I took the time to look around, get my bearings. We'd landed in what seemed like a large area of bare forest. All around us were great giants of trees. It was quiet, except for our breathing and the sounds of the ocean. Ben, Luke, and I scanned the area for any signs of danger, any signs of a trap. I was more than shocked that we didn't find any. Perhaps Jenine had told the truth. Looking in the direction of the old ruins I'd seen, I signaled to the group Snow standing before me. "You all know the plan. 3 groups. 1 with me, 1 with the Beta, and 1 with the Gamma. Let's go," I barked. Men started filing in around me, but I couldn't focus on them. Lily was here, I knew it. I could feel it. Our bond felt stronger, almost like a pull. Before everyone was situated, I started walking towards the trees, anxious to get to my mate. Ben caught me before I hit the tree line. "I know you want to get this done." "I know. But Dimitri, you have to think. We can't just storm the place." "What are you implying?" I snapped. "Nothing. Just that you need to calm down and stick to the plan. Don't act on impulse." I took a deep breath. He was right. "You're right. I just want her back. So do us. So let's do this, rationally." I nodded. "Let's do this." He clapped me on the back once. "I'll go get Clara to call Gideon." I waited until my group formed behind me and for Ben to give me the thumbs up. When all was ready, I stepped into the trees and let our bond pull me forward. Ben and Luke split with their groups on either side of us, covering from all sides. We walked silently for about 20 minutes before I stopped. "All right. Wait here until night. Keep your eyes and ears open. Colin, tell the others we've stopped." "Yes, Alpha." I looked at the sky, the sun was setting, not long to wait now. "I can feel her," Ajax said. "Me too." What?" "I can feel Aya, but I can't reach her." "You can't talk to her?" "No. It feels like there's a wall up. Like she's blocking me out." My guts twisted uncomfortably. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure." "Can you reach Lily?" "I think so. But I don't think I should try, in case she's..." "Right. Better leave it then." I grit my teeth painfully. I couldn't even tell my own mate I was here to save her because she might have turned against me. The fact that I couldn't trust her right now hurt badly. "Alpha, Beta, Ben says they have movement where they are." Colin spoke up suddenly. I spun to face him. "How many?" "5, in wolf form. Tell them to take them out, quietly. And hide the bodies if they can." His eyes glazed over. When they cleared, he nodded at me, indicating it was done. I nodded back and looked around. More than likely they were out hunting, but what if Bastion knew we were here? That wasn't a risk I was willing to take. The sun was nearly set now, and I wasn't waiting anymore. "Tell the others we're moving in." His wolf nodded at me while my men took their positions. Silently, we stalked through forest. Every step I felt closer to Lily, until I saw the tree line breaking ahead. I signaled for the men to stop. Cautiously, I inched forward, the ruins coming into view. It was rubble, bricks and stones lay on the ground and in huge heaps where a castle once stood. One lonely tower stood strong against the elements, though it was covered in vines and the roof was all but non-existent. Ben. I mind-linked him. Now. Now. I crouched, waiting. Clara was supposed to lift the veil that hid the castle. A minute ticked by. Then another one. And another. I was losing patience when suddenly, the old scattered rubble and dilapidated tower in front of me became a beautiful stronghold, straight out of a book. The one tower was now accompanied by many, with lights glowing in the thin windows. The walls were high, solid brick and stone, lush vines crawling up and twisting together. Even the air changed, it cleared and held a noticeably different texture. None of this held my attention though, because standing in front of the magnificent structure stood an immense gathering of wolves. Rogues. My eyes ran over them, thin, foaming from the mouth beasts, and landed on the man standing in front of them. The resemblance to Lily's father was uncanny. It was truly hard to believe they weren't related by blood. The one big difference were his eyes. Cold, flat, bloodthirsty. Bastion! I snarled viciously. Dimitri's POV. Welcome to my home Alpha. Though I don't remember extending an invitation. Ajax was going crazy in my head, begging to be let out so he could rip this man's head off. I was close too. My voice was icy and dangerous as I answered him. You extended the invitation the second you took my mate from me. Bastion's eyebrows raised in disbelief. Your mate? Yes, my mate. I growled. Where is she? Your mate, He paced back and forth, finger on his chin as he pretended to think. The pretense was getting to me. Finally he halted and slow smile crept onto his face. Ah! You mean Lily? I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but I don't think she views you that way anymore. My spine rippled under my skin, my vision turned red. Distantly, I felt Ben and Luke's groups join me, the men behind me closing in around me. Preparing to fight. Bastion eyed us one by one, the ignorant smile never leaving. As if he found our attempt humorous. His eyes landed on Clara, racking up and down. Ben growled loudly, the sound echoing around us. You must be the witch. Mate to that wolf there. He jerked his chin in their direction. And you are the psyche I've heard so much about. Clara deadpanned. Bastions laughed heartily. Is that what you think, my dear? Well, at least I'm not boring. Tell me, are you happy where you are? Satisfied with the side you've chosen? This time, my growl joined Ben's. I glanced down the line of wolves to see Clara giving Bastion an icy glare. More than happy, in fact. She replied. Really? I was under the impression that you had qualms about your daughter's safety, her future. Being raised amongst wolves instead of her own kind. You keep my daughter out of this. Clara shouted. Just think about it, dear Clara. You could free yourself from this mutt, he gestured to Ben, and come join me. Your daughter would be raised amongst her own kind. Better, amongst the last of the clan that was destroyed. I would teach her true magic, make her, and you, more powerful than you'd ever dreamed. To my surprise, Clara laughed. Bastion's face fell slightly, a hint of confusion taking over. I would think. She snickered. that it would hard to teach anyone when you're dead. And I don't foresee you living long enough to make that offer again. I never offer anything twice. But you seem to be forgetting that only one side here has a mother wolf. And it isn't you. He snapped his fingers, again reminding me of Gideon. My attention was drawn to the heavy wooden doors behind him. They creaked inward slowly, revealing a small figure. My heart picked up double time. My breath stopped altogether. All I could see was the flame of red hair I loved so much, and the eyes that captivated me from the moment I set eyes on her. Lily. My voice was barely audible. Bastion gestured to her, and the wolves behind him parted. She walked quickly down the steps, making her way to stand beside him. When she took his hand, smiling up at him like she did to me, my heart shattered in my chest. Lily. I took a step in her direction. Lily, it's me. She turned, but her face gave nothing away. No recognition. No smile. No love. What had he done to her? Is he the one? She spoke to Bastion. Her voice was monotone, flat. Yes, that's him. What did you do? What did you tell her? I demanded. The truth. You are here to take her away from me, are you not? He brushed her hair away from her face, and I almost shifted at the sight. I told you he would come. He wants you for his own use. They even brought the witch, see? He pointed to Clara. I do see. She gazed around emotionlessly. You know what you have to do. Yes. They are nothing compared to you. Yes. Our eyes met. 1 second, Lily was a stranger. Cold, distant. The next, I saw the girl I loved. The girl I would do anything for. My chest just about cracked with relief and joy. A million questions danced in my head, but I pushed them aside for now. Her eyes pleaded with me, I kept whatever expression was on my face, ready for her signal. Lily stepped away from Bastion, her eyes only focused on me. It will be easy, she said. Like destroying a sand castle. Now, I shouted. Men around me shifted on my command, running over the invisible line separating us. I gave control to Ajax, my clothes shredding into scraps around me. At the same time, Lily drew a sharp dagger from goddess knows where, turning and aiming for Bastion's chest. He caught her wrist at the last second, his face going from confusion to awe and to then anger. I jumped at them as he threw her to the ground. How? He raged. Lily smirked. That's not part of the game, is it, Bastion? I should have drained you of your blood the minute I had you in my grasp. Yet, you probably should have. She sent a swift kick to his shin, cussing him to stumble. Not missing my opportunity, I grabbed his shoulder with my teeth, tossing him a good 10 feet into the fray of fighting wolves. Unfortunately, he recovered quickly, flicking his hand towards me. A stunning pain radiated through my body a second later, I yelped in surprise. You may be an alpha, but you still don't outclass me. Bastion raised his hands again as I stood protectively in front of my mate. Before I could pounce, a bright green light shot out from the forest, hitting him in the stomach. He dropped to his knees, looking around wildly. Maybe he doesn't, but I do. Gideon stepped from the thicket, a swarm of our warriors behind him. They immediately joined the battle, tearing into the rogues mercilessly. A chunk of flesh landed in front of me, blood soaking into the ground. Bastion got to his feet, eyeing his opponent. I didn't think you'd come. Isn't hiding sort of your thing nowadays? You've threatened my family long enough. All right then, brother. Let's see if you've learned anything while you were cowering in fear from me. Bastion barely had his hands raised when Gideon sent another spell at him, this one hitting his arm. Bastion screamed as the flesh started to melt, an intense burn scorching it. Because of you, I missed out on raising my daughter. Gideon hit him with another spell. You've tortured my wife. And another. You used her to kidnap our daughter. Bastion was sent flying backwards, slamming into an already mangled rogue. Tonight, the last of your clan will die. The two started facing off, bolts of light flying from their fingertips. I spotted Luke taking on two rogues at once, with the third coming up from behind. Luke. Behind you. Lily's voice broke me out of my reverie. I looked at her with wide eyes, wondering why on earth she hadn't shifted yet. She must have read the question in my eyes, because she answered my unspoken thoughts. I can't shift. Aya is protecting the pups. I nodded once in response. That would explain why Ajax couldn't reach her earlier. Go help the others. I'm going to find my mom. I shook my head violently. I didn't want her out of my sight. Lily reached up, taking my wolf face in her small hands. She kissed my nose, drawing a whine from me. I'll be fine. I promise. It's far safer in there. Everyone is out here, fighting. They need you, Dimitri. I licked her face, nuzzling into her. She kissed my nose again before turning and running through the packed frenzy into the castle. I watched her until she disappeared, then turned my focus again on Bastion. He looked far worse in the few minutes I'd be distracted. Gideon seemed to be handling him well, but I wasn't risking anything. Taking off in their direction, I tore through countless rogues who attacked me. 3 jumped at me at once, claws raking into my flank. Grabbing one by the throat, I dispatched him quickly before killing the other 2. I was less than 10 feet away now. I watched as Gideon slammed Bastion against a nearby tree, falling lumpy to the ground. Together, we stalked toward him. Ben appeared at my side, Luke covering our backs. Bastion eyed the 3 of us, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. No, wait! He gasped. It's my right to choose how I die. That's the law of the clans. You don't get that right. You are an exile. Gideon snapped. I shifted back to my human form. The snarls and yelps behind me faded away as I glared down at my enemy. How would you choose to die? I asked. He met my gaze with wide eyes. I could see the gears turning in his head. To the death. You and me. Ben snorted behind me. Fast as lightning, I struck. Taking his head in my hands, I twisted with all my strength. I was left with a mangled corpse at my feet. I win. I turned to Gideon. Burn the body. He nodded, snapping his fingers. Flames erupted, hot and high. We turned away, facing the now still rogues before us. Lilis POV. Why did this place have to be so big? I had no idea what was going on outside, but I knew it when Dimitri got hurt. My leg started to burn fiercely, but I knew it was his pain. I'd almost turned back, but I wasn't leaving my mom here. Mom! Mom, where are you? I shouted. Nothing. Okay, next floor. I raced up the stairway, throwing open the door at the top. A loud grunt left my lips when I collided with someone on the other side. Mom. Not quite. I should have counted on Bastion leaving someone to guard the castle. Instinct took over, and I swung my arm out, catching the rogue off guard. He stumbled backwards, holding his jaw. Using a trick Dimitri taught me, I quickly angled my left foot behind his right, placing my hand around neck and propelling him back. He went down, me landing on top of him. Not wanting to waste time in an all-out brawl, I reached between his legs and grabbed his jewels tightly in my hand, twisting slightly when he bucked under me. "Tell me where Rosalie is. Or you'll lose the only thing you're probably still proud of." I twisted harder, feeling something pop under his clothes. He shrieked loudly, tears forming at the corner of his eyes. "Tell me!" I shouted. "Okay, okay. She's in the last room on the right. Please, let go." I did, but not before twisting my hand all the way around. I left him on the floor, crying and holding himself while I ran down the corridor. I'd barely come to a full stop before I pushed on the door. Which was locked. Of course. "Mom! Are you in there?" I banged on the heavy wood. "Lily!" Her voice came from the other side, small, but audible. "Yes. Can you unlock the door?" "I can't. It locks from the outside." I looked at the guard again. He was still writhing on the ground, cursing the goddess and somebody's mother. I jogged back, standing over him and cracking my knuckles. He peered up at me with a terrified expression. "Keys. Now!" I demanded. I don't have them. I swear. I was only put here to keep watch, I don't have them." He gripped his package tighter, waiting for me to strike. "Then break down the door." His face morphed into disbelief. "I can't even stand, how I am supposed to break down door?" Grabbing his collar, I lifted him so our eyes met. "I'm running on limited time here. I can't access my wolf right now, so that leaves only one option you. So either stand up and help me, or I swear I will rip off what's left of your DK." I hauled him to his feet and gave him a shove in the direction of my mother's room. His hand still cupped his injury, but he slowly made his way, me trailing behind. He glanced back at me, raising an eyebrow. "I'll help you on one condition," he said. I scoffed. "I'm not in the mood to negotiate. I want you to take me with you." That brought me up short. "Hey! Bastion is going to lose, we all know it. Just nobody wanted to admit it. I don't want to stick around and be killed. I've lost too much already, my pack, my family. I want a new start." My head was starting to hurt. I didn't have time for this. "I can't make that promise. At least let me leave with you. I'll go my own way from there. Just get me off this island." "Fine. Now open the door. My name is Dante, by the way. I don't care if your name is Mary Poppins." Door. Finally, he turned away from me and got to work. Together, we kicked the door repeatedly until, with one final blow, it swung open with a resounding bang. I stepped in and looked around. The room was bare save for one small, filthy mattress, an even smaller but equally filthy blanket and a bucket in the corner. A thin window was placed well above eye level, letting in a single stream of moonlight. My eyes fell on my mother, arms hugging her torso standing against the wall. "Mom!" I opened my arms and she took a hesitant step towards me. "Lily, what's going on?" "I heard fighting. Dimitri is here. He's come for me, for us. We're going home." "Home?" she breathed. She looked around the room, and for a second, I wondered if I would have to drag her out of here. How long had she been captive? Most of my life? I worried she would have some mental breakdown, refusing to leave. But to my relief, she simply nodded once and walked up to me. I allowed myself a brief moment of embracing her, this woman I didn't remember knowing but longed to have, before pulling away and taking her hand. Come on. We need to go. How are we getting home? I'm not sure. But we are leaving. Bastion. With any luck, he's already dead. Wish I could have done that myself. I glanced back at her. Her eyes were filled with so much hatred and despise that I gulped. I think it was safe to say I got my temper from my mother. Over her shoulder, I saw the rogue, Dante, following us. We quickly made our way to the stairs, stopping at the top. I turned to him. You first. You want to leave with us, then you protect us first. Make sure it's clear. Fine with me. I narrowed my eyes at him as he stepped past me. His footsteps echoed off the stones as he descended, growing more and more distant. My mother and I waited at the top until his voice floated up to us. All good. Come on. Taking her hand again, I led us down the stairs. Confirming there was no ambush waiting for us, I started to lead the way to the exit. Dante stepped in front of me, holding out his palms. Stop. What are you doing? It's quiet. I think it's over. My stomach started to churn uncomfortably. My hand pulled out of my mother's as I raced down the hall. Who had won? Was everyone okay? Was Dimitri okay? I still felt our bond. What about Clara? And Ben, and Luke? These worries ran through my head as fast as my feet carried me to the doors of the castle. I almost tripped over them as I saw a tall figure coming up the steps. My breath hitched and tears formed in my eyes. And then I was running again, launching myself into my mate's arms. Finally, I held him as tightly as held onto me, both of us holding back tears. I felt his fingers under my chin, lifting my face to his. His lips crashed down on mine with a passion so fierce, I swear my heart caught fire. Inside me, I felt I astir, acknowledging we were back with our mates. I kept my arms around him as he pulled back. I missed you so much. He sighed against my lips. I missed you too. How did you find me? Clara. Remind me to thank her. I peeked around him, stunned to see many rogues, now in human form, staring at us. I tapped Dimitri on the back, giving him a look. He sighed. They surrendered after I killed Bastion. They want to come back with us. I'm not up for it, honestly. Mom and Dante joined us then. Dante walked past us into the crowd of waiting wolves, while Mom looked around anxiously. Rose. I looked to where my father was standing with Ben and Luke. He was gazing at my mom with a mix of relief, hope, and fear. She took a small step in his direction, and then she was in his arms, him having transported himself in front of her. I watched my parents reunite, both of them crying, kissing, unwilling to let go of the other. Which reminded me that I had a message for them. Pulling Dimitri along with me, we walked over to the emotional scene. I cleared my throat loudly, getting Gideon's attention. I have something for you too. I said. Mom turned to face me, her cheeks stained with tears. There was no way to say this without sounding completely crazy, so I just went for it. Grandpa says he's sorry. And that's he's proud of you, Mom, for never giving up. I turned to Gideon. He wanted me to tell you that even though you weren't his first pick for his daughter, you were undoubtedly the best. He's sorry, and hopes you can forgive him. My parents looked at me like I was, indeed, crazy. Both of their eyes were white as dinner plates, mouths hanging open. It was Dimitri who broke the shocked silence. How? he asked me. I smiled up at him. I'll tell you everything later. Right now, I want to go home. Home sounds good, Mom said quietly. Agreed, said Dimitri. Together, we turned to face the rogues. Those who want to come with us, can. But know this, until I can trust you, individually, you'll not be staying in my pack. There is land between my pack and another that you can make home on. In time, if I deem fit, you may join Blood Moon, or our neighboring pack, or choose to go your own way. I noticed Dante staring at me, and I gave him a nod. Dimitri tugged my hand, leading me down the steps and through the crowd. The smell of smoke registered in my nostrils, and I turned my head to a small fire burning under a tree. Is that? Yes, Dimitri answered without looking at me. I looked back to the flames. Good. Lilis POV. To my surprise, Gideon joined us as we made our way through the portal Gideon had opened up. I hadn't even noticed him before. When we were safely back in Blood Moon, he wrapped me into a tight bear hug. I'm so happy you're safe. Thanks. Can't breathe. Gideon, I gasped. He released me with a laugh. Dimitri was quick to claim me once more, pulling me into his side. We'd come out of the portal to the side of the pack house, which now had people running out of it. Mates reunited, children running into their father's arms. The scene made me smile as I absent-mindedly rubbed my stomach. Dimitri's hand covered mine, gazing down at me with eyes full of love. Lily. Thera pushed through the crowd, and I let go of Dimitri's hand to meet her halfway, crushing her in a hug. Thank the goddess, I've been so worried about you. She cried. I missed you too, Thera. It's over now, he's dead. And thank the goddess again. Come inside, Greta has food prepared, are you hungry? I laughed. Starving. We made our way into the pack house, stopping to thank the warriors who'd fought by our side. The rogues were left in Gideon's charge, to take them to their new land. Temporary land, I thought. Perhaps some of them would join us, eventually. I took the time to look around as we walked. Blood Moon held a different perspective for me now. This was truly my home, and I was proud to be Luna. I bid good night to the last of the warriors who lingered, eager to have my mate to myself. Of course, it couldn't be that easy. The second the door closed behind our group, I was surrounded. Lily. I'm so glad you're back. Hazel pulled me in for a hug. You gave us all quite the scare, child. Don't do that again. Greta chimed in. Clint pulled Hazel away, kissing the top of her head. I got to take down my fair share of rogues thanks to you. He grinned. Hazel and I rolled our eyes. Is dead? Greta looked at Dimitri, who raised his eyebrows. I'm sure we all did, Greta rarely swore. Yes. Dimitri replied. She nodded once. All right then. Come, sit. I have food and drinks coming. And she scurried off, leaving us with nothing to do but make our way to the cafeteria. I sat at the first table I saw, exhausted. Dimitri sat beside me, Thera on the other. Ben and Clara took the seats opposite, Luke and Miguel beside them. Hazel and Clint sat farther down as Greta rolled out a trolley overflowing with food. My stomach growled at the sight. Goddess, I'd missed her cooking. Take what you like, there's more in the kitchen. You're the best, Greta. I reached for one of her famous dinner rolls, filling my plate to the max. Gideon came to fill 2 plates for him and my mother, who was sitting silently beside Thera, looking down at the table. I kept an eye on her as we ate. So. Just throwing this out there, but why didn't you shift? You know, back at the castle. Clint asked me. He ripped off a piece of roll and dipped it in gravy before popping it into his mouth. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I can't shift. Not right now anyways. Instantly, every pair of eyes became worried. Why? What did he do to you? For how long? Guys. I held up my hands, making them stop. It wasn't anything Bastion did. Well, okay, sort of. But it was my decision. I put Aya away, sort of in a dormant phase, to protect the pups. How? Asked Hazel. Celeste. The moon goddess. Clara asked. Yet. So quick update time for those who don't know, I've been having random chats with her whenever she sees fit to pull me into her realm. Or my subconsciousness anyways. Both my parents eyed me with bewilderment. I turned to them to explain. Bastion wanted me to forget everyone. Dimitri, you guys, blood moon. He forced me to drink some potion, but as soon as he did that, Celeste pulled me away. Only it wasn't her this time. It was your dad. I looked at my mom. Her hand went to her mouth as I talked. You spoke with him, really? She seemed on the verge of tears. I nodded. He said it was Celeste's version of a loophole. I laughed to myself. She can't interfere in our lives, our fates. So she gave him a choice. Whatever the potion was going to do to me, would do to him instead. I only had to act like it worked. And he agreed. Gideon sounded a bit skeptical. Understandable though, given what my grandfather had done to them. Yes, he did. But not before he gave me the message for you too. He said it might be a blessing in disguise, to forget everything. Everything he did that hurt you. I'm not sure how to feel. Mom whispered. On the one hand, I'm happy he realized and accepted his wrongdoings. On the other hand, when I meet him again, he won't remember me. I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure the goddess has a plan in mind. I hope so. Dimitri was tense and quiet beside me. I tried to meet his eyes, but he avoided it. Dimitri. I placed my hand over his. You kissed him. He deadpanned. I winced. I knew this would come up, but I was not going to deny it. I still felt guilty for the pain I know he must have felt. I'm sorry. I whispered. Did you? He didn't seem able to get the words out, but I knew what he was asking. You would have felt it, if I had. He shook his head. Clara took the pain away. So I didn't feel the pain of the betrayal. I cringed at the word betrayal. But I had. I couldn't deny it, even if I wanted to. But I could put his mind at ease some. It was one kiss, one time. He never took it further, and I never did either. I would have given up the charade in a second if he had. I didn't have a choice, Dimitri. When he met my eyes, I saw a vulnerability I'd never seen before. I hadn't felt any pain, but I could only imagine what he had gone through. I vowed to make it up to him, any way I could. Finally, he blew out a long breath. I know. I'm sorry. You did what you had to survive. I can't say I wouldn't have done the same, in your position. And you kept our children safe. Just the thought of him touching you makes me want to kill him all over again. I gave him a weak smile. I know. Thank you. The atmosphere became noticeably less tense at my words. I turned my attention to Clara. And thank you. I said. She stared at me. Me? For what? For finding me. How did you find me anyways? Locator spell. She shot a glare to my father. Matter of fact, everyone did, except my mother. Gideon fidgeted in his seat, avoiding everyone's eyes. Now that I wasn't distracted, I noticed for the first time that he had 2 black eyes. What happened to your face? I asked. Your mate punched me. What? I rounded on Dimitri, who shrugged nonchalantly. This never thought to use a locator spell. Luke scowled. It wouldn't have worked. Rose said. Everyone stared at her. Until Bastion had Lily, he used magic to hide our location. He wanted you to come Alpha, and you. She turned to her husband. His plan was to kill all of you, and take over Blood Moon. Hey! Dimitri scratched his chin. Well, then I guess I'm sorry I punched you. You guess. They started to bicker, and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ben started chuckling, and soon, we were all laughing. It felt so good to be home. So, how did the deal with your wolf come into play? Luke asked me when we sobered. I guess that wasn't just my decision. We didn't know what was going to happen, or how long I'd have to keep fooling Bastion. So we agreed she would protect the pups until someone came for us. But you're home now, Miguel pointed out. She knows that. I guess she'll come back when she's ready. I shrugged. Dimitri wrapped his arm around my shoulder before letting out a yawn. I think we can continue this in the morning. I'm ready for bed. Everyone agreed, and again, I was hugged by everyone. I stopped my mother as everyone filed out the door. You're welcome to stay in the pack house, I told her. She looked at Gideon. Where have you been staying? In the cells, he muttered. She looked at me, eyes wide. It's a long story, Mom. Catch up with Ben, and tell him to find a room for you too. Okay. Thank you. And Lily. She bit her lip. I am sorry. For the part I played. I never meant to stop. I stepped close to her, wrapping my arms around her waist. I know. I'm not mad. I understand. You don't need to feel guilty, because I know you did it to protect the ones I love. And yourself. I could only be angry with you if you had sacrificed yourself instead. I never knew you, or I didn't remember until recently, but I want my mom. I want us to know each other, and be a family again. I felt her tears drip onto my shoulder as she hugged me back. Thank you. When I released her, I looked at my father. I won't say I understand everything you did, but I understand better now. I also can't say I'm not still mad, because I am. But I'd like to work on our relationship too. I don't just want a mom, I want my dad too. Tears shone in his eyes as he nodded. He opened his arms slowly, and I accepted his embrace. A little piece of me clicked inside, knowing I had the thing I wanted most my whole life, a family. I finally had my family back, and nobody was going to take that away from me. Lilis POV. As soon as we were in our room, I tugged Dimitri's face down to mine, kissing him lovingly. I don't remember how we ended up in bed, and I didn't care. I was making up for lost time with my mate. The sun was peeking over the horizon when I rolled over and gently caressed his face. Goddess, I loved this man. A sharp movement in my torso had me shooting up the next minute. Instantly, Dimitri was awake, looking around the room. What is it? My hands were placed on my stomach, waiting. I held up a finger, telling him to wait. A few seconds later, I felt another kick. Oh my goddess! I squealed. What? Feel. I placed his hand on my stomach, right where I'd felt one of our babies. I watched his face as one of our pups kicked quickly 3 times into his palm. The smile that spread over his lips left me breathless. Slowly, Dimitri placed his face against my skin, over the budget that appeared there. Hello, whichever one you are. I'm your daddy. I was sure both pups heard him, because at his words I felt movement on either side on my stomach. I laughed joyfully, basking in the amazing sensation. A jolt spread down between my thighs with the next kick and I sighed in amusement. Now I have to pee. I laughed. Dimitri smiled and moved to let me up. When I came back, Dimitri was ready to place his hands on my skin again, eager to feel our children. I'm so happy the first time is here, with you. I said. Me too. This is amazing. You are amazing. He kissed my stomach tenderly. Our moment of happiness was interrupted by a random thought. My random thought. But important nonetheless. I sat down on the edge of the bed, pulling the blanket around me before speaking it aloud. Dimitri, what happened to Jenine? I looked at him. His forehead creased. Did she really leave the island then? Hey! He explained about the phone call she'd made to him on the plane. Worry coursed through me, strongly. I didn't know she left. I whispered. My eyes wandered around the room as I thought. She wasn't among the rogues? For sure. No. Worry quickly turned to fear as I cradled my baby bump now. Jenine was still out there. Out there, somewhere, and intent on revenge. And now she had magic on her side. Dimitri picked me up and placed me on his lap, taking my hands in his. I promise, no, I swear to you, I will not let her come near you. I will not let her hurt you. You, or our children. I searched his eyes, the sincerity and promise in them calmed my nerves. I kissed him fiercely, letting him know without words that I trusted him, heart and soul. I love you. I whispered. I love you too. 10 years later, Violet. Garrett. It's time. I called to my children. They rushed over to me, followed by their friends. I smiled at the enthusiasm, the happiness on their faces. Who would have thought the twins' 10th birthday would come so fast? It seemed like yesterday I was gazing into their tiny faces, all wrapped up and sleeping on my chest in the delivery room. All the while their dad, Big Bad Alpha Dimitri Carlos, was sitting on a chair some feet away puking into a wastebasket. I laughed quietly at the memory. Can we open presents now, Mom? Garrett asked me. Not until you blow out the candles. I want cake first. Violet declared. Don't you want to see what Isabel got you? Garrett asked her. Violet thought about it for a minute before shaking her head, her black hair swinging around her face. Cake first. She demanded. I felt arms go around my waist as Dimitri laughed. Patience, you two. Your mom went to a lot of trouble to plan this, so we go by her schedule. Yes, Dad. Okay, Daddy. They gave him their most innocent smiles. Violet's blue-green eyes shone like the clearest of oceans. Somehow, she ended up with a mix of mine and my mom's eyes. They were exquisite, and only stood out more from the black hair she'd inherited from Dimitri. Garrett, on the other hand, got all of my red hair, and his dad's strong features. I was positive there would be a lot of broken hearts the day he found his mate. Often I found myself watching my kids, wondering which of them had gotten Jenine's wolf. They were both strong individuals, and together, they schemed like nothing I'd ever seen. More sweets had disappeared from the kitchen since they'd come along than one would care to admit, with one always the diversion while the other did the thieving. Violet seemed to have inherited my sassiness, while Garrett was a rather quiet boy, focused and attentive. Plus, he could negotiate better than his dad. My parents had become official spoilers, unable to say no to him even when they wanted to. But they were still the best grandparents I could have ever asked for. Yet, thinking about Nia only made me think about Jenine. 10 years, and nothing. No threats, no attempts. It was as if she'd fallen on the face of the earth, but I knew she hadn't. Deep down, I knew she was out there, waiting for the opportune moment. Jenine was a threat that was distant, but never forgotten. Many times over the years, we'd get a lead here or there, and Dimitri always sent someone to follow it. And we were always just a little too late. Mostly, I tried to focus on the happiness my children brought to my life. I never imagined I would feel more fulfilled than I did, being a mother. The feeling was indescribable, and every day was a new adventure. Clara and I had become extremely close, especially after Ben and her got married. Finally, Isabel and Violet were attached at the hip, and sometimes I wondered how I ended up with triplets instead of twins. Even Clara joked about it. "You okay?" Dimitri whispered in my ear as the kids blew out the candles on the gigantic cake Greta had made. I clapped with everyone else, joining in a round of happy birthday. "Fine. Just thinking," I whispered back when the song ended. "About." I watched my daughter took over distributing pieces of cake to the other kids. "Jenine." Dimitri tensed behind me. "The pack is well guarded." "Even better, with Killian's pack." "Don't worry. I know." Killian had maintained a permanent location outside Blood Moon. We were practically one pack, with them being only a 30-minute run outside the border. Still, the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I distracted myself by helping Luke, or Uncle Luke now, roll out the table with gifts for the twins. Cake abandoned, they seated themselves at the end of the table, huge grins of excitement adorning their faces. We all gathered around to watch, laughing when Violet squealed upon opening Isabel's gift, her first makeup kit. Dimitri wasn't very impressed, but I shrugged it off. It's not like I'd let her leave the house made up like a prostitute. Garrett received a couple new games for his PlayStation, and a couple new books from us. Mom and Dad got the kids tickets to some concert for a band they liked, which we would thankfully not have to go to. All in all, everyone was very happy. "Mom. This one is for you." "Hey." I turned my attention to my son, who was pointing to a rather large box in front of him, wrapped with red paper. My dad reached around him, flipping over the tag. "He's right. It says to Lily." My eyebrows scrunched in confusion. Why would someone send me a gift on my kid's birthday? Unless it was from the twins, I could see them doing something like this. I walked over to the box, eyeing Violet and Garrett. "Did you two do this?" I asked. "No." They shook their heads, their faces showing nothing but honesty. Pulling the box towards me, I read the tag. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but the nagging feeling in my stomach had now turned into a pit of dread. Quickly, I tore of the bright red paper. I stared down at the plain white box, suddenly very nervous about opening it. My hands paused above the lid, and I glanced at Dimitri. He looked just as confused as everyone else. In my head, I whined quietly. Slowly, I lifted the lid and peered inside. Every ounce of blood drained from my face, the lid of the box dropped from my hands and onto the floor. Memories invaded my mind and, unconsciously, I sent out a surge of power around the room. Everyone present gasped as they felt my emotions as if they were their own, and in turn, I was bombarded with a wave of their emotions. I grit my teeth, reining in my emotions, and erasing the cloud of my powers over them. Dimitri was at my side, looking over my shoulder. "Clara, Hazel, take the kids outside," he said in a hushed tone. "Come on kids, let's go play in the bouncy castle." Hazel ushered the twins from their seats, motioning them towards the door. "But I want to see what Mom got." "Me too." "Later." "Come on, everyone outside," Clara called. The door swung closed and Dimitri gently moved me to the side. My eyes hadn't moved from the object in the box once. Carefully, he picked it up and turned around. Gasps surrounded us. "Isn't that Luke?" started. "No way." Ben finished. "I'm going to inform the patrols," William stated. Thera left with him while I was still too stunned to speak or move. Nobody said anything as Dimitri set the metal claw on the table. Finally, I broke the silence. "Why now?" I whispered. "I don't know. But we knew she would send a message sometime," Dimitri answered. I stared at the claw, rusted and coated with old, dried blood. The exact tool used to kill Paige all those years ago. I closed my eyes, hoping it would disappear when I opened them, and I would be enjoying my children's birthday, just as I was 10 minutes ago. Sadly, the gruesome thing was still there when I opened them. Fear engulfed me, strong and unavoidable. "Get the twins back in here," I said. Dimitri looked at me in silence. "Now, Dimitri. I want them back in here, now." His eyes glazed over momentarily. I turned and ran out the door, down the hall. I reached the foyer just as Hazel and Clara were ushering the kids back inside. Grabbing my children, I wrapped them in my arms, going crazy protective in my head. "What's going on? Are we being attacked?" They looked up at me with worry, but I shook my head. "No, nothing like that. I'm sorry guys, but I think the party needs to continue inside." "Okay. But what about the bouncy castle?" Violet pouted. "And I wanted to go swimming," Garrett said. "I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you, okay? I promise. But I really need you guys to stay inside." Neither of them looked happy, and I felt terrible. This wasn't how I wanted to celebrate their birthday. Thankfully, Hazel came to my rescue. "How about a water gun tournament? Come on everyone." The kids cheered and I shot her a grateful look. Dimitri patted the twins' heads as they passed, before coming to my side. "I want her found, Dimitri. If I have to go myself, you won't. We will take care of this. She will never touch them, Lily." The worry in his eyes was distant, but I saw it. I looked at my dad. "Do a locator spell." "Lily. Don't argue with my dad." Clara stepped forward, rubbing my arm in what was supposed to be a soothing gesture. "Lily, it's not going to work. We've tried a dozen times," she said gently. "Try again." A stray tear slipped from the corner of my eye as she hugged me. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Somewhere in the middle of Dimitri taking me back and helping me up the stairs, anger settled in. "We're going to find her. And when we do, I thought she'll wish she had never crossed us." I finished. "Hey everyone! There will be a sequel. The second book will be the continuation of this book. The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.